On Saturday the 16th of March, just last month, a 23-year-old mother named Briana Winston was last seen leaving her Atlanta apartment when she would mysteriously disappear. Her vanishing was first noticed when she failed to show up at work on the following Monday, leading her family to eventually report Briana missing to the Clayton County Police Department. Officers then conducted a safety check at her home in Atlanta, but after gaining access to the property, they were disturbed to find that the apartment had been meticulously cleaned and there was no sign of Briana. But to make matters even worse, after searching the surrounding dumpsters for any potential evidence, Briana's uncle would make an even more disturbing discovery, when he would stumble upon a trash bag containing a pair of shoes that were drenched in bleach. However, despite these incredibly suspicious details, after 3 weeks of investigating, the police are still no closer to finding out the truth, which has understandably led many to wonder, what really happened to Briana Winston, and could she be Atlanta's next victim of human trafficking? Briana Winston was born on the 3rd of February in 2001 in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, alongside her loving uncle Kendrick Langford and cousin Jasmine Walker. Little is known about her younger years, but it would seem that Briana was always a very happy child and would spend most of her time with her close friends getting up to typical teenage girl antics. But as she grew up, it wouldn't be too much longer before she would meet somebody that she would eventually decide to settle down with, resulting in the birth of her daughter and the official start of her life as a responsible adult. However, despite her massive efforts to keep the family together, the relationship she shared with her daughter's father would unfortunately come to an end for reasons unknown, and given some issues she was dealing with at the time, Briana reluctantly agreed that their child would be better off living with her father. But determined to prove herself, Briana would then go on to find a job to help provide for her child, even choosing to work part-time elsewhere to bring in some extra money. And it would seem that these efforts were starting to pay off, as right around the time that her daughter was turning 4, Briana had now established herself as an excellent mother who was more than prepared to regain custody of her child. However, just as the tide was starting to turn in her favour, Briana's ex-boyfriend would suddenly find himself in trouble with the law after stealing around $8,000 worth of money orders from a local business, meaning his parental guardianship was now firmly in question. But despite this possible upcoming decision to give Briana custody once again, it would seem that this day would never actually arrive, as she would mysteriously disappear on that fateful day in March. On Saturday the 16th of March, the 23-year-old woman was seen leaving her Atlanta apartment located on Garden Walk Boulevard at around 11 p.m. as she was heading out for the night. However, despite being witnessed by a neighbour, it is unknown where she was going or who she was meeting, but it was assumed that Briana was supposed to be returning home later that weekend. The next day then quickly came, but it would appear that she did not return as planned, because after another day passed and Monday morning approached, it soon became clear to her family that something was wrong. A phone call was made from Briana's place of work to one of her family members explaining that she had not turned up for her scheduled shift and that this behaviour was very much unlike her. So, in response, Briana's family attempted to get in contact with her themselves in the hopes that she would at the very least be able to confirm that she was safe. However, the days would continue to pass, with Briana remaining impossible to get a hold of. So, given the escalating situation, her family were eventually forced to officially report the young woman as missing to the Clayton County Police Department. On Wednesday the 20th of March, the police would respond to a call that they had received about a possible missing person from the Gardenwood apartment complex in Riverdale, as by this point, Briana had not been seen for 4 days and therefore her life could have potentially been in danger. So, given the circumstances, the police department started an official investigation into the matter and claimed that they had put officers on the case. However, despite the ever-increasing danger associated with the situation, they refused to allocate any major resources and kept their investigation close to the chest. So, frustrated and concerned, Briana's family then decided to take the case into their own hands and rushed over to the apartment complex to see if they could find any clues that may have provided evidence as to where she might have gone. However, without a key, they were unfortunately unable to enter the property, and instead were forced to contact the leasing office that looked after the apartment to see if they could grant them access. But what they would soon find out upon speaking to the team would send shockwaves throughout the entire neighbourhood, as not only did the leasing office have access to the apartment, but upon searching the residence for any signs of Briana, they were shocked to find that the property had been completely cleaned out, leaving behind no possessions or potential pieces of evidence. So, horrified by this news, Briana's uncle Kendrick Langford, alongside his daughter Jasmine, headed out to the back of the building to see if they could find anything else that may have helped them with the case. But what they would soon discover would take this already suspicious case to a whole new level, as inside a nondescript trash bag, they would find a pair of women's shoes that were drenched in bleach. On Friday the 5th of April, around 3 weeks after Briana's last known sighting, a local news station known as WSB TV Atlanta would get in touch with Briana's family as they had caught wind of the case and were desperate to spread some much needed awareness. Upon interviewing the family, it was revealed that in the previous weeks they had discovered a number of suspicious artifacts that could have been linked to the case, such as the bleach-soaked shoes and the spotless apartment. However, they added how, despite the suspicion, the Clayton County Police didn't seem too interested, later being quoted as saying, "We are frustrated as the police aren't saying much about the case." Briana's family then spent the rest of the day passing out flyers and asking people for help in finding their missing loved one. But despite their efforts, these attempts to uncover further details would not prove to be successful, eventually resulting in the grief-stricken family having no other choice than to leave their faith with the police, in the hopes that they would be able to solve the case on their own. However, after almost 4 weeks of searching, Briana Winston still remains a missing person to this day, and her shock disappearance has left the local community with an immense fear that whoever is responsible could still be out there, lurking in the shadows. Now, unfortunately, as far as the official investigation goes, this is all we know for now. But one thing that is for sure is that Kendrick Langford, alongside the rest of the family, will no doubt continue to spread awareness for their missing loved one for as long as she remains away from home, as it will surely only be a matter of time before we find out the truth. However, given that Briana Winston has now been missing for over 3 weeks alongside the harrowing details of her disappearance, I can't help but feel that the likelihood of her safe return is only growing weaker as time passes. So with that, let's get into some of the potential theories. Now, just before I get into the theories themselves, let me just say that there has been very little coverage on this particular case, and therefore the theories associated are just as thin. In all honesty, I could only find 3 news articles across the entire internet that even mentioned Briana's name, and they are all pretty much carbon copies of each other, so I apologise for the lack of detail. But saying this, there was one particular aspect of the story that the news did discuss, which heavily stood out to me as a potential motive for crime, which in my opinion could mean that the father of Briana's daughter might just be the person responsible for her disappearance. Now, the following statements are nothing more than speculation based off my research, but according to WSB TV Atlanta, it would seem that Briana's ex-boyfriend and the father of her child was recently arrested for stealing nearly $8,000 worth of money orders from a local business. Unfortunately, I can't validate this piece of information any further than this, but if we are to believe that these statements are true, this would mean that he would be a criminal, and certainly not somebody who should remain the sole caregiver to a 4-year-old child. So, with Briana preparing herself to once again take custody of her daughter, could this decision have created a rift within the already rocky relationship? I know this is a stretch, but what if the pair were discussing custody arrangements at the apartment, and after getting into a heated argument, one thing led to another, resulting in a brutal scenario that could have cost Briana her life? If this was the case, it would certainly explain why her apartment was so clean after she vanished, and also why her shoes were found thrown away and soaked in bleach. But before I get too carried away, at this point there is no concrete proof that these shoes did in fact belong to Briana. So for all we know, this could just be a huge red herring. Also, the clean apartment could just be the sign of a woman who has purposely left her old life behind, as there was no mention of bleach being detected in the home. So with this in mind, could Briana have actually been responsible for her own disappearance? And if so, what could have been her motive? Well, according to her family, Briana was somebody who would never leave her daughter behind. So given this statement, it would certainly seem that any theory that pertains to Briana leaving on her own accord is shaky at best. But for argument's sake, let's say she did decide to abruptly leave her old life behind for whatever reason. But if so, where could she be hiding? Well, one theory that seems to keep cropping up time and time again on this channel is the premise of human trafficking, as it is something that occurs to thousands of black women every year, especially for younger women such as Briana. So rather than focusing on the idea that Briana left on her own accord, I think our time would be much better spent speculating on the theory that she could have been trafficked by an underground operation acting out of Atlanta, Georgia. A quick Google search will show you that this particular practice is prevalent in the state of Georgia, with Atlanta seeming to be one of the most extensive hubs in the United States for human trafficking, with 1 in 25,000 people falling victim to the operation every year. So given these horrific statistics, it certainly wouldn't be too hard to believe that a 23-year-old woman could have been lured into this world for one reason or another. Now, in respect to Briana's family, I will refrain from going into any more detail here, but I do think this is a theory worth looking into, and I hope the Clayton County Police are keeping all options on the table in their investigation. However, regardless of the reason behind her disappearance, the main focus here is that a person is missing, and a daughter is without a mother right now, so please share her case with as many people as you can. And by doing so, hopefully we can make a real difference and bring closure to her family. Anyway, with that, I think I'll leave this video here. But as always, if you have any theories of your own which you think may explain what happened to Briana Winston, please leave your ideas in the comments down below and I will do my best to get back to you. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, if you found this story interesting, feel free to check out the video on screen now, which details the case of Marissa Carmichael, who was another young black mother that mysteriously disappeared earlier this year after being picked up by a man at a gas station.